Welcome back to Educator.com. This lesson is Camera Workshop Part 1. Let's begin. In this lesson, we are going to be preparing you to perform what I call the Camera Workshop Part 1. So in order to perform that Camera Workshop, we're going to go over all the different parts of it. So first, we're going to identify all the different parts of your camera body. So in order to perform this lesson, it's best if you actually have your camera and your tripod with you so that you can go over all the different parts of your system with the lesson. So in addition to the camera body, we're also going to be talking about the tripod. And we're going to talk very specifically about operating the lens, which includes focusing, zooming, and what I call calibrating the lens. I'll define that for you in a bit. We're also going to talk about looking through the viewfinder. And then finally, once I've gone over all these different elements, and hopefully you have your camera standing by, you're actually going to perform what I call the workshop. And you're going to think of it as like a checklist. So we will go through that workshop, and it's one thing after the other that you're going to play with and or execute or make sure you know how to use. So we will review the steps of that camera workshop so that you are completely prepared to review and perform it on your own without watching the lesson. You can just go through it with your quick notes. So that camera workshop, again, is available underneath on the bottom of the screen in your quick notes. Okay, but for now, you just follow along with this lesson. So if you have your camera out, it's great. You can take a look at your camera as I'm talking. But the first thing is you have your camera body, and on it, I want you to find and identify the power button, okay? And practice turning it on and off, turning your camera on and off. That's probably pretty obvious and easy. Each of you does have a different camera, so I'm going to kind of go over some of the different ways that it might be on your unit, but for the most part, it'll be pretty self-explanatory, most of these elements. Okay, next is your camera has a camera mode as well as what we call VTR or playback. So you have to figure out how to go back and forth between that. Sometimes it's a button, sometimes it's a menu within your menu settings, and we'll talk about menu settings in a second. So when you're in your VTR playback mode, you want to make sure you know how to execute play, rewind, and fast forward, and also how to search, which means to select your different clips. So after you've recorded 3 or 4 different shots, there's a way to actually search through those shots and then play back. Okay, then you also want to find how you record. Your record button on your camera. That should be a big red button somewhere on your camera. And sometimes you have next to that button or part of that button, there's a way to either film using your video mode or a still picture mode. Sometimes you actually have another little button next to it that you have to turn, and those are 2 different modes. So depending on your unit, you want to look at your camera and try to figure that out during this camera workshop. Okay, next really important part of the camera is the power supply. So every camera, of course, has a different method of this. Sometimes you can actually plug AC into your camera, in which case you should see if you can do that, and if so, where that connector is. It'll say AC on it. But usually, most of you are going to be using batteries. So find your battery, and you're going to want to practice releasing the battery. The next part of your the camera workshop, the next thing would be to think about is also, once you've released your battery, is how are you going to charge the battery, and make sure you know where how to do that. Sometimes it's a connection into the camera unit itself, or sometimes it's you pop off the battery and you put it into a little charging mechanism, another little structure to plug into the wall. Okay, we're also in the camera workshop going to go over your lens. You'll be performing different tasks with your lens. One will be the zoom control. So every lens has a method of being able to change its focal length, zooming in and zooming out. And now some lenses, some of you may have cameras that are bigger and a little more sophisticated, and you can actually use your hands, your fingers, to turn the lens, and that's called the manual method of zooming in or out, to zoom your lens in or out. The other is automatic, which is going to be a little button and you push it. Sometimes that little button has a T for telephoto and a W for Y, and that's telephoto is a longer lens, it's zooming in, and wide is zooming out, a shorter lens. Additionally, find your focus control. Again, depending on your lens, some of the larger, more pro cameras will have an actual manual control, which means you can manually focus your lens versus automatic, which some cameras, there's an automatic button or a button for you to focus, but also you can put it on automatic mode, and it allows you to, for the camera to focus for you. Okay, so now let's talk about the recording device. So every camera is going to have a different method that it actually records your video information. And some of the older cameras are going to still be using a tape recorder. And so if that's the case, part of your camera workshop is you're going to practice ejecting and putting in a tape. And I know that seems really silly, but believe it or not, you do need to find the eject button. It's one of the most common things for the cameras with tape. A lot of times people didn't know how to eject the material. You want to find it and then also be able to load and unload a tape. Now, nowadays, most of your cameras are going to have memory cards. And there's going to be a little door, and you have to open up that little door and actually release your memory card. So part of the workshop will be releasing and putting in and taking out your memory card.